What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Rantin Review Pro Wrestling. We're looking back at AEW World's End 2024, the last pay-per-view of the year for All Elite Wrestling and wrestling in general. It's a show that I enjoyed, but I've also seen other people's reactions to it, so we're going to talk about that in this video. Before we get into that, I want to remind you guys, as always, YouTube, you know what this is. Now every YouTuber says that. The algorithm, the like buttons, the subscribe button. If you enjoy videos about wrestling, AEW, etc., hit that like button and be sure to share this video wherever you talk about wrestling on social media because it definitely helps out the channel. So World's End. Here's the thing. Going into it, you know, the usual complaints and criticisms and praises for AEW still exist. It's been this way all through 2024. I will say, as a general review of this show, I absolutely love this show. I think it's one of the best pay-per-views from AEW this year. I think it's one of the best pay-per-views in general this year. They really saved the best for last in this case. We had a lot of really great stuff. It was a good mix of what I think AEW can do really well. I think this show is an example of AEW firing on all cylinders and how good it can be and where it kind of can find its niche in the landscape where you've got, again, we're in an era, the melodrama era, a lot of cinematics and drama and all that stuff that people talk about. That's what the audience wants right now. AEW gave you a bit of that along with what it does at its core, which is, you know, the moniker they really earned on this night, we're the best wrestle. No better sign of that was the opening match of the night, the Continental Classic, Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher in the semifinals. This match was crazy. Will Ospreay is the MVP of AEW. It's hard to kind of think about AEW without Will Ospreay at this point because he's become such a highlight of the show since he's been there. And it's probably the best signing that Tony Khan's ever had. I will go on record as probably saying I think he's a better signing than He Who Should Not Be Named. I think he's a better signing than Jon Moxley. I think he's a better signing than a lot of other people. Because Ospreay's contributions to the show are just incalculable. That's not taken away from those other guys. That's just a personal opinion, by the way, so don't get crazy about it. But Ospreay and Fletcher, man, and Fletcher himself, man, that kid, that's something that came out of nowhere. I did not expect Kyle Fletcher to become the single star that he became, that he has become. And they have done it. This is one of the biggest wins for AEW this year, especially with this feud between the two of these guys. Ospreay gets busted open fairly early in the match. There's a lot of great sequences. You love it when you see guys who know how to work with each other very well because their matches are very, very smooth. And that's what it was here with Fletcher and Ospreay. Ospreay bleeding a little bit too much. A little scary after a while because there was blood pouring out of his head at times in this match, and the usual things with Ospreay matches, he takes some crazy bumps. Fletcher is very vicious. He gives a lot of crazy bumps. Back and forth. You know the story with these two. I cannot do this match justice by describing it on YouTube. Definitely a recommendation to watch. Ospreay, however, manages to win this one, and the tournament started playing out the way I kind of thought it was going to play out. Ospreay gets the win. They're 1-1 now, but he will advance on to the finals of the C2. And the second C2 semifinals match was Kazuchika Okada against Ricochet. Another case of character work here. And I have seen so many people complaining about Ricochet's character. I've seen YouTubers make entire videos talking about how terrible Ricochet's character is. I'm sorry, hot take. I don't think it's terrible at all. I think it's brilliant. I think Ricochet has tapped into something that he can run with. He's getting crowd reactions. Yeah, they're throwing toilet paper at him. They hate him. Yeah, that's his job. He's trying to be a heel. He's trying to be a really weird, geeky, unaware kind of a heel, and I like the fact that he's so unaware, that his character is so unaware, and it plays on some of his social media antics. I think it's great. I think it's going to work out. I mean, honestly speaking, I find that a lot better than... This is what you want to see when you get a guy like that coming into a company, a guy who's been in other places. And to be honest, you know, even when he was in Lucha Underground and under a mask as Prince Puma, Ricochet's character from from Lucha Underground, from Ring of Honor, from New Japan, from WWE, from NXT has always kind of been white meat babyface. He's got that like Kushida thing. He's got the thing with Tanahashi, the Ricky Steamboat thing, right? He wants to do something else. So now he's testing out this heel character. I think it works. And the toilet paper thing is a great thing. Hammerstein Ballroom, it's always great when the wrestling companies co-create with the fans. The fans will do something and the companies will run with it. And they definitely did on this night. Okada, what can you say? It's Kazuchika Okada. And we finally on this night, after all this complaining about it all year, we finally saw Kazuchika Okada. This Kazuchika Okada that we used to see in New Japan, we saw him on this night. Not particularly in this match, but going forward, which I kind of gave away to finish. But yes, Okada did beat Ricochet in this match. This match was a lot of fun. It was a perfect match to follow what Fletcher and Ospreay did at the beginning of the night because nobody could follow that. So Ricochet and Okada did a different kind of match that was also equally good. Had a lot of character stuff in it. Had a lot of drama in it. Okada had this one brilliant move. The crowd was starting to make fun of Ricochet for being bald. So Okada did this whole thing where he sat Ricochet in the middle of the ring, ran the ropes crossways, sideways, horizontal, vertically, stopped just to smack Ricochet in the back of his bald head. The crowd went nuts. I laughed my ass off. That was funny. Okada is low-key, of all the years I watched him in New Japan, I never knew Okada was as funny as he's been in AEW. If there's one thing you can say about his transition over to Western wrestling, I think he's one of the best Japanese mainstay wrestlers came over to the States. I think Okada is one of the best ones. Because, again, he's merged his talent with the comedy stuff. He's playing this so well. I don't agree with all the complaints. I see the complaints and I just kind of ignore them at this point because it's like gaslighting. It's like, I see Okada doing great work. I see Ricochet stuff that Ricochet's doing great work. It's going to eventually work. You can kind of tell Ricochet stuff's going to work in the future. So, But Ricochet went down in this match. He lost to Okada. Okada going on to now have a rematch from the G1 finals from a couple of years ago. Him and Ospreay once again in a round-robin tournament final, which meant we were going to get a match of the year contender because the last time they did it, it was a match of the year contender in the G1. So, and I tweeted out, AEW fans, get ready because you're about to see, for those AEW fans who never watched New Japan, you're about to see why we were watching New Japan all those years and we stayed up to 2 o'clock in the morning to watch this stuff. And they effed around and found out about that today. However, Ricochet left in the ring. Swerve Strickland comes out. And Prince Nana comes out with a little radio flyer cart full of toilet paper, hands it out to the fans at ringside. Ricochet standing in the ring, and they all throw the toilet paper on a count of 3 into Ricochet. It was great. Ricochet standing there mad as hell. I love this. This stuff is good. I don't, again, there's a lot of people who are just going to be the negative on everything. This is how you can tell. I'm going to do a little editorializing here on the side because you guys know I'm very critical of the wrestling online community, even though I'm supposedly a part of it. Not really. But I have watched since last night because I recorded a video before and I decided to re-record it after getting the sense of the community. I watched a lot of nitpicking, complaining last night about this show. And I'm like, yeah, see, this seems to be a function of that's the trend right now. It's like stocks. The stock of AEW is on a downward trend. So everybody is betting down. And I'm looking at where the price action's actually at. I'm using wrestling with finance terms, and I'm sorry. But for me, it looks like there's a consolidation right now in AEW, and they're about to shoot up. And I'm seeing the fundamentals of certain things that's a good idea, that's a good idea, that's a good idea, that's a good idea, and there were a couple of them on this show tonight. Moving on from that, we then get into the rest of the matches on the card. We had some other great matches on this show. The ones, let me put it this way, there were no bad matches on the show. There were some matches that were less than some of the other matches on the show. One of them was Mariah May defending the AEW Women's Championship against Thunder Rosa in a Tijuana street fight, which the action in the match was good, but this is another example of kind of the old AEW that you can complain about and that was just stuff out of nowhere. I don't think, and I've seen a lot of other people complain about this. I agree with this complaint. this rivalry did not warrant this match stipulation. I think the match stipulation is there just to get some interest into the match, and I think that is a complaint that is definitely, I would say, valid against AEW's booking at times, is that they book a match without booking the feud that leads up to the reason to have the match. Mariah May, Thunder Rosa, two of the best women's wrestlers in the world, they had a great match. You had thumbtacks and all the great stuff that goes along with these hardcore matches. The finish was kind of brutal because Mariah May does a sit-out powerbomb from the apron through a table onto the floor. I thought Thunder Rosa was dead because she wasn't moving and got the 3 count. She's fine. But the match itself, the match performance was great. The build to this match, not so good. And it being a Tijuana street fight didn't seem to matter. Will Hobbs and Kenosuke Takeshita faced off for the International Championship. This match, low-key, was way better than I thought it was going to be. It was scary in some moments, because Hobbs is selling his legitimate leg injury, and they almost fell off the top rope for a superplex. In fact, they did fall off the top rope for a superplex. The crowd started chanting, "Please be careful," and they did this a couple more times in the match, which scared the hell out of me. But ultimately, through the mess, Hobbs probably had one of his best matches I've seen him have in AEW, and Takeshita is that guy. He is that guy. He is him. So this was a great match. Takeshita retained his championship. Hobbs, I think, reminded the AEW audience of what a blue chip talent he actually is. It's just unfortunate that he's had all these injuries that have kind of stalled his momentum. Again, that's not a fault of AEW's booking. In this case, it's just a simple fault of the bad luck of injuries. We then move on. The TBS Championship. This match had a lot of fanfare to it. Mercedes Mone defending the TBS Championship in a rematch against Kris Statlander. The second match, the match they had earlier this year, was a phenomenal match. This one was a phenomenal match. It wasn't as clean as the first match, but I think overall, as a package, it was different but good. It wasn't as crisp as their first match. There were some really wonky moments in this match. There were some really slow moments in this match, but as a whole, it built and built and built and built. I hesitate to say it was all slow burn. I think they lost their way in some of the spots in the match. You could tell it when Statlander almost got counted out outside the ring. Mercedes had to go back outside because they forgot the spot to tie up her Statlander's foot into the ring apron. So they did that spot, even though they clearly forgot about it. Statlander takes her boot off. That was a messy part of the match. But then everything else in the match was absolute fire. And by the time we got to the end of this match, I was like, that was impressive. And the ending sequence of reversals and cradles and counters, where Mercedes shows her wrestling chops with a very, very well done pinning combination that she basically trapped Statlander. Statlander had no ability to kick out, even though she's almost twice the size as Mercedes Mone. That is the brilliance of actually using some wrestling stuff, real life wrestling stuff in pro wrestling. Mercedes Mone successfully defending the TBS Championship in tears after the match. You see a little bit of respect between her and Stat. I think that was a little bit real life coming through there for Mercedes Mone. And Mercedes has been on a roll lately. I do feel that she finally, after all this time outside of the WWE bubble, it looks like the past couple of months, the matches that she's had, she's found her groove. This is the Sasha Banks NXT level of performance that we have expected from Mercedes Mone when she entered the international wrestling scene, and we've been seeing it the last couple of months. Hats off to her. Hats off to Kris Statlander, one of Kris's best matches. And this match is really for Kris Statlander to elevate her profile. There are going to be people now who have never heard of Kris Statlander who will now know about Kris Statlander. So that is a win on all fronts for me on that one. Another match that was on the night. This is one of the matches that kind of on a low point because the feud had, again, circumstance and booking problems with this feud. MJF versus Adam Cole, the blow-off match that's over a year in the making. One time in wrestling, a year and a half ago, MJF and Adam Cole's bromance was probably the second hottest storyline in wrestling a year and a half ago, behind WWE's Bloodline storyline. Like, it had some momentum on it, had teeth, it had a lot of interest from a lot of people, and then it kind of fell apart, not only in the booking, but then because Adam Cole got injured, and Adam Cole, who I'm not going to comment on his physical well-being. I do have questions about it. I see him tonight. He looks very frail. I don't know if he's playing too many video games as Chugs and he's not working out enough because he's spending 5 hours playing Final Fantasy. I don't know what the case is, but He didn't look in the best shape I've seen Adam Cole in, but he's still a great performer. So I'm not gonna body shame the guy, but the match was good. It wasn't the best match that I expect, as good a match as I expected from these two guys. And I got a sense from this whole match that this was just, we just want to get this over with. We want to blow this off so we can wrap this whole thing up. It's a mess. It's a mess of a storyline that was great at one time. It fell off the rails for various reasons, and here's the blow off. Let's just get it over with. And I think MJF and Adam Cole and all of them are ready, and Tony Khan are ready to be done with this and put this behind you. And I like that along with getting rid of Rampage, I kind of see ending this Adam Cole MJF thing is, okay, these are things that have not worked for AEW, and now we're getting rid of them. Again, this is another reason why I say AEW might be on its way back to an upswing after being down for the last 2 years, because they're shedding some of these things that haven't worked in the past. But the match, again, technically speaking, in ring, the match was good. The story, MJF did have one brilliant part where he got Taven, the Kingdom essentially, who were guarding the Dynamite Diamond ring outside the ring, so MJF couldn't use it. He pulled an Eddie Guerrero, pretended that they hit him. The referee fell for it, ejected the Kingdom, which allowed MJF to go get the ring. He tried to use it against Cole. It backfired a little bit, but ultimately MJF did get the win, which he should have, because Adam Cole hasn't been wrestling for God knows how long. MJF should have won this match. MJF won the match, but he lost the war. And after the match, we get Kyle O'Reilly, we get Roderick Strong coming to the ring. They throw MJF back in the ring. There's a split second where you think when O'Reilly and Strong are squaring off of MJF and Adam Cole is lying in a heap in the corner, that this was going to be the turn where O'Reilly and Strong would side with MJF against Cole. And I think they intentionally teased that on purpose, and then it turned out not to be. In fact, the Undisputed Kingdom at the end of this whole thing is completely together. Nobody turned on Adam Cole. They're a group again. MJF is now off to wherever he's going to be doing, which is probably getting himself back in the world title scene, which is getting very crowded right now. And I think that's the end. I think, and a lot of people are like, I hope the feud's over. It really felt like, yeah, this is them saying, okay, we gave you the match. We built this thing up for a long time. We needed to pay it off. We paid it off. Now, let's move on. So that's the way I took that match, which is why I don't dislike it too much. But it was the match was okay. We also had, of course, the finals of the Continental Classic. Again, the rematch from the G1 Climax from a few years ago. Kazuchika Okada against Will Ospreay. They've faced each other many times. Like I said before, AEW fans, you are in for a treat, because this is one of the matches that all of us New Japan fans would stay up late night for. You guys are in for a treat, and they got a treat. This is actually one of the best Ospreay Okada matches they've ever had, including the New Japan ones. So this was great. And the psychology, which Ospreay, you can tell Ospreay's done the work. He's done the work, because people always complain about him being a flippity-doo guy. And the story tonight, the in-ring storytelling, which I said, I think we're about to get a masterclass on in-ring storytelling. Ospreay comes out stumbling, bandage wrapped around his head. This is all storytelling. This is all the stuff that people complained and said that AEW, in particular people like Will Ospreay, don't do. These guys are proving these people wrong, left, right, and center. The story is that Ospreay's coming in with a very banged up head, and against a guy he's only beaten twice in 9 matches, and that was all fairly recently. Big brother, little brother kind of thing. Even Okada made a reference to this, bitch. And Okada, it wasn't a dominant performance by Okada. Okada did DDT Will Ospreay several times on the floor, in the ring. It was a little hard for me to watch, because, Ospreay's really good at selling. Something he probably learned from Tanahashi over in New Japan. That sympathy thing where your babyface is beaten down so much, you're just like, oh God, please just stop hitting him. Just stop hitting him, please. It's hard to watch. Stop dropping him on his head. Don't do it again. Yeah, you did it again, right? These two, match of the year contender. Will Ospreay, I cannot recall off the top of my head ever seeing somebody wrestle 2 match of the year contenders in the same night. Will Ospreay did that crap this night. His match against Fletcher is a match of the year contender, and the match against Okada is a match of the year contender, which goes on with the list of match of the year contenders that Will Ospreay had this year. I think it's very hard to argue against Will Ospreay being at least in a 1A or 1B for Wrestler of the Year, if you actually know what you're talking about. which means that you've actually seen his matches and not just, commenting on them. But this was fantastic. They ripped the bandage off. Ospreay starts bleeding again. The heel Okada gets to come out. And like I said before, this is when we saw this Okada in this match. This is the Kazuchika Okada we haven't seen probably since 2021, 2022. Because the last couple of years in New Japan, a lot of the complaint was from a lot of fans that he was sandbagging. And he's been sandbagging since he's been in AEW, but he can. He doesn't need to wrestle like this all the time. It doesn't even make any sense for him to wrestle like this all the time. Save it for these big main event matches. Save it for the finals of a big tournament until a big pay-per-view, and probably should have been the main event match of the night, which would have been cool. But save it for that, right? Save it for that. I think this match probably would have been the last match on the show if what happened after the world title match wasn't planned. I think they probably would have made this the final match of the night. But Okada and Ospreay, after using each other's holds on each other, after Ospreay hitting a Rainmaker, getting a near fall, kicking out of a Rainmaker, Okada, of course, kicking out of all of Will's stuff. But this wasn't spam finishing. They spaced them out to points where you thought legitimately there's a way to do this, and Okada and Ospreay showed you how to do this. You space them out so there's enough time between the finishers that you think, oh, okay, this is the end of the match. Oh no, it's not the end of the match. That's the way you do finishers as false finishes. Is you don't just, oh, you hit your finisher, then I hit my finisher. Now I'll hit your finisher, you hit my finisher, and we'll just kick out of them. That's not the way to do it. What they did in this match was well done. Ultimately, Kazuchika Okada well ahead in the rivalry between him and Will Ospreay. Once again defeating Ospreay. I think it's 9-2, 10-2 now between the two of them. I don't know what the record is offhand. But Okada, again, proving himself as, and with the narrative they're going with, the best tournament wrestler of all time. They're trying to get him to say that he beat Chono's record because they said, well, Chono won 5 G1s, Okada won 4 G1s. Well, the C2 is technically kind of like the G1, even though it's different enough. But I'll give it to them. I'll give this little twisting of, WWE does this stuff all the time. AEW does it as well. This twisting of the facts to get to say that Okada is a 5-time major tournament winner. That they really had to stretch to get to that. But I'll accept it. I'll allow it. It's fine. Especially because, just as a side note on the Continental Classic this year, my God, this was way better. But the tournament itself was way better booked than last year's tournament. The semifinal matches in this tournament, any of those guys I legitimately could have seen winning this tournament. I could have seen any legitimate combination of the finals coming out of the semifinal matches. This could have easily, I would have been fine with this, have been Fletcher and Okada, and the story had been Fletcher trying to do what Ospreay hadn't done before. I could have seen this being Ricochet and Ospreay as another rematch between the two of them, with Ospreay being injured and Ricochet, who's been getting a lot of cheap wins, maybe getting another cheap win to beat an injured Ospreay. They could have done that, and that would have worked out as well. There's all kinds of combinations they could have come out of that. That's smart booking. I know AEW gets a lot of criticism with their booking, but the way they booked the Continental Classic this year, I don't know who booked it. I don't know. Can we give Tony Khan credit for this show and the booking of the Continental Classic because it was well booked? I don't know if he's going to get credit for that, or somebody going to say, sources say Bryan Danielson actually booked the Continental Classic. Don't be surprised if you see that rumor going around too, by the way. But the C2 was brilliantly booked this year. The finals was brilliantly booked. Brilliant performance. And then you got 4 guys like Ricochet, Fletcher, Okada, and Ospreay in it. They're all they have to do is now perform. And this is great. The Continental Classic last year didn't establish itself as I wouldn't say it was in league with the G1 last year. This one's Continental Classic was better than the G1. By a slight margin, it was better than the G1. The G1 was really good this year, but I think the Continental Classic, even though, again, they're different styles of round robin tournaments, I think they are, this year at least, they're they're parity with each other. They're on equal footing, I would say, as tournaments, as far as the enjoyment I got out of it. And both of them had really phenomenal finals too. So this is just great stuff. I wonder if there's a Forbidden Door match in here though too, because they're calling Okada the greatest tournament wrestler of all time. Zack Sabre Jr., who was considered the greatest tournament wrestler of this current era, just won his first G1. So are we aiming for Okada and Zack Sabre Jr. to see who's the best tournament wrestler come Forbidden Door? That's a possibility. Time will tell. See where these guys are in the future going forward with that. The big shock after the match, however, which everybody's waiting for me to get to, is after the match, Christopher Daniels comes out, says he is no longer an EVP. He normally come out and present Okada with the championship, but we all knew what he was getting at as soon as he said he was no longer an EVP. Kenny by God Omega comes out, and business Omega comes out, gets the Continental Championship. And again, for everybody who says Omega is not popular, the pop from this crowd, yeah. He's amazing. And the people who know. Again, I like this. I like this. I like that this show kind of reminded everybody who was watching it, or at least most of us who are watching it and looking at it not through, tinted lenses. This is what AEW can do. And presenting Okada in this way, presenting Omega in this way, he comes to the ring, presents the championship to Okada. Okada holds the belt overhead, and I immediately noticed what they did. They framed the next shot of the two of them standing face to face with each other, and in the background is the banner for All In Texas. July the 12th, I am particularly happy. This is what I said, and that you guys watched my video the other week. This is exactly what I was hoping that they would do, and I said this in the video the other week, and they're doing it in exactly the way I wanted them to do it. So I'm not taking credit for it. I think they already had this in mind anyway, and I just happened to guess correctly. But this is great. This is exactly what I want. They have now said, we got 7 months to All In Texas. Probably the biggest rematch in the pro wrestling non-WWE universe that people have been wanting to see. This has been about 5 years now. 5 years people have wanted to see this rematch. Now we're going to see it. Now, on the off chance that people from AEW actually or do listen to this video, I don't think they do. Well, I know some people from AEW do listen to my channel. We all know that. But on the off chance any of them are listening to anything I'm saying, I love everything that you've done with this. Right now, you got 7 months. Keep in mind that the average lifespan of a wrestling fan is about 3 to 6 years. So those matches happened in 2017, 2018. There are a lot of fans who are AEW fans who never watched those matches, didn't watch them during that time period. They may have just seen clips of them, so they didn't get the full impact of living with those during that year and a half in the middle of that series when it was a active thing and being like, oh God, when are we going to get the rematch? That was a great time period. For all of us who were New Japan fans at that time, we all can tell you that was a phenomenal time period. Reestablish the legend of Omega and Okada, and not just through Excalibur mentioning it and commentary. I mean, over the next 7 months, start building up rebuilding the legend of that, because a lot of wrestling fans, like I said, haven't seen that match who are AEW fans now. There are fans who were 8 years old when those matches happened and probably weren't watching wrestling, who are 16 now, who weren't around then. There are people who never had heard of that match. So I think use all of your creative marketing chops to slowly kind of trickle in how this match is legendary. It's going to help. By the time you do all that, when you get to that match, not only were the fans who originally saw the Okada-Omega rivalry in 2017 and 2018, will we be excited, but you'll now have established it as some mythical thing that the rest of the wrestling audience who's going to watch those shows, who didn't watch it at the time, can go, okay, y'all have hyped the hell out of this thing. So let's see it go. So let's go. Again, find creative ways to do it just to seed in. They should treat it like, for the longest time, I remember if I'm going to use a WWE analogy, for the longest time, the way people treated the streak, the way WWE treated the streak, right? The way WWE treated Michaels and Undertaker, right? AEW needs to start seeding the legend of Okada and Omega the same way that WWE did the legend of the streak, the legend of Taker versus Michaels, the legend of Steamboat versus Savage, or even on a more pop culture level, the legend, how they've always made Andre and Hogan at WrestleMania 3 seem legendary. That is what I would like AEW to do and find ways to do it over the next 7 months. I hope that happens, and if they do it, I will be tickled pink again. Main event, AEW World Heavyweight Championship. Jon Moxley defending against Orange Cassidy, Switchblade Jay White, and Hangman Adam Page. Following all the great wrestling we have seen on this night, I think having this kind of schmozz Fatal Fourway was fine. There's no way these guys were going to top what Ospreay and Fletcher and Okada and Mercedes and Statlander had done earlier in the night. So they had a very overly booked Fatal Fourway match. It's fine. That's what we were expecting out of this. And we got everything we needed out of this. This match wasn't very, very long. It wasn't very, very complex. It was basically your typical Fatal Four-Way match, which the whole entertainment is seeing the 4 different characters interact with each other. We got that. Nothing wrong with the match. Not great or anything, but it did what it needed to do. Moxley saw the blood on this night and decided that, even though he didn't intentionally do this, I think Moxley's body had seen all the blood during the night and like, I got to get on this too. And even though he didn't blade, he got put through a table and then the back of his head was bleeding. So I think Moxley's body just goes, nope, there will not be. If other people are bleeding on the show, we're bleeding on this show. So there was no reason for it at all. And it was an accident totally, but it's just funny that happened. Again, I think it was a fine Fatal 4-Way match. Jay White was a standout in this match. He had some tremendous moments in this match. I think it was very needed for him. He did take the pinfall. He did get pinned by Moxley because the Death Riders were all over this match, all over the place. There was a brilliant spot where Wheeler Yuta Jay White had Moxley pinned. And Wheeler Yuta literally just like dropped an elbow on the referee to break up the pin. And Jay White's looking at him like, what the? Really? And then he goes after Yuta. Mariah Shafir tries to come up behind him. He turns around and Jay White just on instinct hits her with the Blade Runner. And that got a huge pop on the night. The fans were going nuts for this, but it was the opening Moxley needed to get the Death Rider on Jay White and get a rare pin, because Moxley, usually when he wrestles Jay White, whether it's in AEW or New Japan, Jay White has legitimately had his number. Jay White has won way more times than Moxley has in their encounters. But this one was a Moxley win over Jay White, a little feather in his cap there. And after the match, all chaos breaks loose. We start thinking that the Death Riders are going to Pillmanize Jay White, the Bang Bang Gang. The Bang Bang Gang. I always have a hard time saying that. Bullet Club Gold. They're still on the injured list, so nobody's coming to save Jay White, except here comes FTR. Okay. And then the lights go out, and I'm thinking this is either Ricky Starks or it's Adam Copeland. Pleasant surprise. Great surprise. Rated FTR is back. They are real-life friends, real close friends. By the way, you gotta watch the post-media scrum. What they're doing for Fight for the Fallen is actually pretty damn cool for the people in Asheville, North Carolina. A lot of people have forgotten that place is still a mess after I think it was a hurricane or tornado, whatever natural disaster went through the Carolinas earlier this year in the States. It's still a mess over there, and people have forgotten about it. They need a lot of help. So Fight for the Fallen, definitely pay attention to that. Watch the post-media scrum. You'll see Dax and Copeland and all those guys talk about not only their friendship, but what this show means for Asheville. I think that's really, really cool, actually. So check that out if you want. But as far as this post-match stuff, this was pretty cool. They got in, they ran off the Death Riders. Shafir is lying on the mat because she's done, because she's got Blade Runner. And here is Adam Copeland. He pulls out something he debuted. I don't know if he debuted it against Roman Reigns, but he definitely used this against Roman Reigns in WWE. Moxley's old Shield partner. The whole thing with taking off a bar from a steel chair and putting on a crippler crossface with the bar in somebody's mouth. Mox got that treatment tonight, and it looked good, as it always does. That was one of the greatest things that they've ever invented. And now it looks like Moxley is about to face somebody whose viciousness is on the same level, because he's been beating up a lot of these guys who are either finesse wrestlers like Jay White, who are tough guys but kind of crazy like Hangman Page, and a lot of the gimmick wrestlers like Orange Cassidy, but he hasn't faced anybody who's a grizzled veteran like he is. And actually, Copeland's more of a vet than Moxley is, and he called Moxley a boy. He's like, that's right, son. That's right, boy, kid. Because when you were, I was doing this when you were growing pubes. So yeah, I like this. I like this. And a lot of people are like, well, why is Adam Copeland in there? He's not fighting for AEW. I think they're kind of done with that right now. This is not about Adam Copeland fighting for AEW. I think this, or at least I don't think it is right now. It seems like this is a grizzled vet versus somebody who thinks he's a grizzled vet, and Copeland's like, no. I'm going to show you how to be the grizzled vet of AEW. So I like that. A great way to end the show. I think this is a phenomenal show, one of the best of the year. Definitely gets my recommendation. Match of the night is hard to call. Again, like I said, it's between the three best matches on the night, the three must-see matches, Kris Statlander and Mercedes Mone. It's a little weird in spots, but overall, the final presentation of that match was amazing. And Ospreay, again, what the hell, dude? 2 match of the years in one night? Come on, man. Come on, man. If this is an indication of what AEW is doing in 2025, whether Tony Khan's still booking it or not, or somebody else is booking it, whatever it was, this show seemed different in a lot of ways. Even the camera work. There was one spot in the Mercedes Kris Statlander match where it looks like, we all know the count out of the ring, the 10 count out of the ring, and a person dives in at the very last second. The way they filmed it on this night, Mercedes is leaning against the rope. She's got this look of satisfaction on her face. Statlander is going to be counted out, and you don't even see Statlander in the shot. And then right before the referee gets to the 10 count, Statlander pops up from underneath the ring apron, dives into the ring, beats the count, and Mercedes' face immediately goes to Sour Patch Kid. That was one of the greatest beating the 10 count spots I have ever seen, and filmed, and just, that was perfect. That was pro wrestling brilliance right there. And I know a lot of people are not going to pick up on that. They're not even going to mention it. They're not even going to give that credit. But you got to give credit where credit is due. That was really, really well done. There were a couple other nights where the camera work was great. Will Ospreay had one hook kick on Okada in their main event match that literally shocked me because the way they framed the shot, it came out of nowhere. And as I mentioned before, the way they framed Okada and Omega with the all-in banner in the background. So I don't know if there is some changes have been made, and I'm noticing them. So maybe other people aren't picking up on them, but hopefully this isn't an anomaly, and AEW will continue to do things like this going forward on Dynamite and on Collision, and leading into our next pay-per-view, which is Revolution, which will be all the way in March. We're gonna have a pay-per-view desert from AEW. We've been used to having them like every month for the last 6 months or so, but now we're going January, February, and March without an AEW in March until we get another AEW pay-per-view. So we'll see how. I'm expecting some big major league stuff coming up. Of course, they're going to Max this week. They've loaded that show up as both wrestling companies head to streaming services. We're in for another interesting evolution in the world of pro wrestling. But again, as far as World's End, I like the way they wrapped up some of their storylines that weren't working. I like some of the new talent direction they've got going on. I like the way the Continental Classic was booked. I think it was one of the best booked tournaments I've seen in a long time. Again, still some of the shortcomings they have, but on this particular show, I think the shortcomings were about at a 15%, and the great things they were doing was about at 85%. So it's a win for me, but I want to know what you guys think. Let your voice be heard in the comment box below. I've been running very long in this video, which probably means I really enjoyed the pay-per-view. So until next time, I will see you guys here for more news, rumors, and reviews on the Rantin Review Pro Wrestling. Have a good day.